I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, Operation Dress Code happening now. The women veterans exchanging uniforms for business suits.
Has reducing prison and jail sentences for some non-violent criminals worked the way it's supposed to? I'm Peggy Pico with a progress report on Proposition 47. And what a new biography reveals about Jonas Salk, the man who developed the polio vaccine.
Most cars are architected the way that this one is, where if you plug into this port, you can take almost total control of the car.
The carjacking going high-tech, the San Diego researchers uncovering security flaws, the legal victory that allows them to continue their work. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Following up, an international terror investigation that led to the arrest of a San Diego man. Mohammed Kodomati took a plea deal today, admitting to making false statements when FBI and State Department officials questioned him at the U.S. Embassy in Ankara, Turkey. The 24-year-old says he lied when he said he didn't know any members of the so-called Islamic State. He also admits to lying about being involved with fighting against the Syrian regime. Government prosecutors recommend an 8-year prison sentence. 2 Navy sailors are recovering tonight after an early morning rescue. The Navy says they were doing a training exercise near San Clemente Island. That's about 80 miles away from San Diego. Choppy waters forced them to call for help. There was a small craft advisory at the time. The sailors suffered some cuts and bruises, but are said to be doing well. Call it San Diego's blitz to keep the Chargers. Fans showed out in force last night at a town hall meeting with the NFL. The Chargers' move to L.A. was at the top of the agenda. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen tells us how the evening played out and what could happen next.
The Chargers are just one of 3 teams that want to move to Los Angeles. The St. Louis Rams and the Oakland Raiders are also vying for a spot in the city, and NFL team owners could decide which of those teams gets its wish as early as January. Last night was full of emotional pleas to keep the Chargers in San Diego. Fans say they've supported the team even when it's losing, and the NFL shouldn't expect the same loyalty from fans in L.A.
I never quit on the people who love me, stood by my side, and battled day in and day out through thick and thin. And you as the NFL should adopt the same honor, duty, and respect to our fan base here in San Diego and vote to keep them right here in San Diego. Thank you.
The San Diego city officials have also been trying to persuade the Chargers to stay. They have offered to build a new stadium in Mission Valley at a cost of $1.1 billion. 2 people at the meeting spoke against that plan and got booed by the audience. One woman said that money would be better spent on things like education and infrastructure. The NFL is accepting public comments until November 13th. You can weigh in on the Chargers issue by sending an email to sd.hearing@nfl.com. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
It may take a while longer to finally identify a man who's been on life support in San Diego for the past 15 years. Just weeks ago, officials were optimistic they had a strong lead. Joanne Farian with our media partner, iNewsSource, explains what happened.
They were so close. Last month, a committee of elected officials, the Border Patrol, and a migrant advocacy group believed they were days away from learning the true identity of the man called 66 Garage. He was given the name in a hospital trauma unit to distinguish him from the other John Does in the unit that day. The name stuck. Garage suffered a brain injury when the vehicle he was traveling in crashed near the U.S.-Mexican border. Months ago, biometrics from Garage generated a name in a Border Patrol database, which led to a possible relative in Mexico. At first, the nursing home where Garage has lived for the past 15 years believed the relative's DNA was sent to the lab to be compared to his, but it never made it there, and the head of the nursing home isn't sure why. He's working with Border Angels, a migrant advocacy group, to find out why the DNA from the potential relative in Mexico never made it to the lab. For KPBS News, I'm iNewsSource reporter Joanne Farian.
A new progress report on California prisons. Experts are looking at the effects of Proposition 47. Peggy Pico highlights the results and impact in San Diego.
California voters approved Proposition 47 last November to reduce some nonviolent felonies like drug and property crimes to misdemeanors. Supporters say it reduces prison overcrowding and helps felons with minor convictions re-enter society. Opponents say it's a get-out-of-jail-free card for repeat offenders. Joining me with analysis of the Stanford report is San Diego's former chief of police, William Lansdowne, co-author of Prop 47, and David Greenberg, San Diego County Chief Deputy District Attorney. And Chief Lansdowne, this report finds about 13,000 fewer inmates are in state prison and county jails since Prop 47 took effect in November. What kind of impact is it having on overcrowding?
It's allowed them to get to the federal mandated number a year ahead of time, which saves money. But what we're looking at is a projection that they're going to save $150 million this year and about $93 million annually to be used for those very things: drug treatment, alcohol and abuse, and schools, K through 12, and then victims.
Sort of to help reduce the recidivism. Is the money being used that way so far this year?
It's not available yet. When it comes, though, it'll be there for those very purposes where it's never been before.
And David, what kind of impact is Prop 47 actually having on countywide crime rates?
Well, in San Diego, I haven't seen any new reports on crime rates in San Diego. I know in Los Angeles, they've had a large increase in violent crime in Los Angeles, which is also consistent with they had the most people released from state prison came from Los Angeles. And in order to get to state prison, the people that committed these more minor offenses, if you will, all had strike prior convictions. So you're talking about more dangerous people that committed a less violent crime, which is why they were there. Now, whether that's, in fact, the people committing all the violent crimes, I don't know. That's going to take time to see.
Sure, but crime rates are down or have been down for the last couple of years overall in San Diego County, correct?
That is correct, yes.
I see. The report did also mention recidivism rate for inmates released under Prop 47 is low, 5% at this point. I'll start with you, David. Why do you think that is?
Okay, well, first of all, the report is authored by the people that help write the statute or the initiative and also are litigating on behalf of the inmates. And when they say 5%, they're talking about people that have been convicted of a new crime going to state prison. Well, you just took a whole host of crimes and made them misdemeanors. So those same individuals are likely committing those crimes, but they're a misdemeanor. You can't go to state prison. And in San Diego, of all the people that have had their crimes reduced, 22% of them have had a new case filed against them. 65% of those people are misdemeanors, and 35% of those people are felons.
So let me get your take on it, though, Chief. This recidivism rate is under Prop 47, according to this report, is very low. What do you think that's about?
Well, one of the reasons that we looked at Prop 47 and pushed so hard to get it is there was a problem in the prison system of recidivism. About 60% of the people coming out of prison were back in prison within the first 3 years of the process. And we believed, and it's shown to be true, about half the prison population is suffering from mental illness or some sort of addiction problem and weren't getting assistance and help. And now what we're looking at, as we did several things, 3 strikes, Prop 36, and now Prop 47, a very low number of those people are going back into the jail system. So I think it is a good indication that it's effective at what we tried to do, lower population and get help and assistance.
Has Prop 47 worked the way you had hoped?
You know, I wished, if I had the ability, I wish law enforcement would sit back a little bit, and I'm very appreciative of David being here where there's open dialogue, both sides of this, and we can come together and find a way to make it work better than it is currently right now. But we need time to do that with forward-thinking people into the future. And
let me end with you, David, on that. How would you like to see Prop 47 go forward?
I would like to see individuals held accountable for their behavior, so that those individuals that don't want help, I'm hopeful that the courts will hold those people accountable and give them longer sentences, which goes against what the chief's talking about. But you do have people that do not want help, that continue to commit crimes, and we want to make sure the community is protected from those people, and I'd like to see them get the appropriate sentences.
All right, well, we'll all be following this and watching this very closely. David Green and former Chief of Police Bill Lansdowne, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Military veterans and San Diego leaders kicked off a 2-week women's clothing drive at the Veterans Museum in Balboa Park. Operation Dress Code will provide donated suits, shoes, and accessories to women transitioning from the military into civilian careers.
Oftentimes we don't, as veterans, know how to begin the job search in the civilian world. It's very different than the military, and we don't have the attire needed or even necessarily know how to put the attire together to have an effective job interview.
Pink collection bins are set up at a dozen locations, including San Diego City Hall and the Veterans Museum in Balboa Park. Clothing will be collected through November 9th. Whether you drive an eco-friendly Prius or a flashy Corvette, your car can be hacked. Researchers at UC San Diego have been finding all kinds of security flaws, but the legal issues surrounding this research have been murky. KPBS tech reporter David Wagner says this week the researchers came out ahead.
So, does this car have lane keep assist or pre-collision?
In a quiet parking lot on the eastern edge of UC San Diego, Carl Kosher is getting ready to break into a car. He's not going to smash its windows or jimmy its locks. He's just going to send it a text message.
So we're going to send the car a command to unlock the door. Right now it's locked and we can't get in the car. And within a second, we'll be able to open the car.
Kosher is not a car thief. He's a security researcher here at UC San Diego. He hacked into this Toyota Prius with the owner's consent to show how vulnerable our cars really are. In this case, the car's weak point was a device plugged into a port right under the steering wheel.
There we go.
That port leads directly into an onboard network that acts sort of like the car's brain.
Most cars are architected the way that this one is, where if you plug into this port, you can take almost total control of the car.
The device itself is a little mile tracking dongle used by some car insurance companies to sell coverage by the mile. Kosher says its security is really flimsy. He can send the device text messages, sweet-talking it into letting him do just about anything with the car.
Once our program is on the dongle, it connects back to us over the internet through the cellular network, and we can send it commands.
And he doesn't have to be anywhere near the car to send those commands.
We don't even have to be in the same country.
Once he's in, it's pretty much open sesame. Kosher could mess with the dashboard display.
So we're going along, and the fuel gauge is about 75%, and now it's empty.
Or he could lay on the horn.
And now it won't stop until we send a command to turn off the horn.
In a previous demo, he and his colleagues were even able to cut the brakes in a slow-rolling Corvette.
You could do all sorts of things to sort of spook out the driver.
Now, Kosher doesn't want to spook out drivers. He wants companies to patch the flaws he and other security researchers are finding. But the auto industry has argued that messing with copyrighted car software violates the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or the DMCA. I asked Kosher if what he did to this Prius was strictly legal.
We think we're all in the clear.
Are there people who think that what you've been doing today is illegal?
It's not clear. I think that some people would like to interpret the DMCA to say that parts of what we did might have been illegal, but that's not our interpretation of it.
This week, researchers had their interpretation supported by the U.S. Copyright Office. On Tuesday, they were granted legal exemptions, allowing them to hack into car systems without fear of breaking copyright laws. The auto industry opposed those exemptions.
What makes them nervous is the uncontrolled nature of independent researchers finding stuff.
Computer science professor Stefan Savage oversees car security research at UC San Diego.
The auto industry has come down pretty strongly, saying, no, we want to keep this restriction in place because it's not safe to allow, hackers to go and look at this stuff, and so it should continue to be illegal. And taken on its face, that would make basically all the kinds of research that we do illegal.
Savage and his team won't have to worry about that accusation once the new exemptions researchers won this week go into effect. The Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers, a lobbying group that fought those exemptions, declined an interview. As for what this all means to drivers, Savage says car hacking hasn't reached the point where the average person needs to panic.
I wouldn't lose any sleep about it. I wouldn't pick what car to buy based on that at this moment. Do I think that means that no one should be worried about it? No, I think that's a huge mistake. I think the car industry has the luxury, which is so rare, of having 5 to 10 years advanced warning to get their act together before there are real and serious attacks.
Savage says what will keep drivers safe is more research and a car industry that's open to criticism. David Wagner, KPBS News.
Video journalist Nick McVicker helped produce that story. San Diego Coastkeeper began its mission to clean up the bay in 1995. To honor its 20 years as a water watchdog, they invited a big-name speaker with a global perspective on water issues. We sat down with the attorney and president of the Water Keeper Alliance, Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. How's it feel to be back in San Diego?
Oh, I love it here. I mean, I actually come down here a lot because my son has lacrosse tournaments here.
Bobby Kennedy Jr. comes from a long line of politicians and activists. He's the third son of the late senator from New York, and his uncle was President JFK. Named one of Time magazine's Heroes of the Planet, the 61-year-old kayaker turned surfer has been a longtime defender of the environment.
The real heroes are the people like the 266 river keepers who are going about fighting this battle every day, have committed their lives to it.
Kennedy has battled with a neurological voice disorder for 16 years. It causes spasms in the vocal cords.
But you know what? People lose legs, they lose arms. It's not a big deal.
What is a big deal for his organization and San Diego Coastkeeper is protecting and restoring swimmable, drinkable, and fishable water across the globe. He says the polluters range from maritime to oil and gas producers that spew toxic waste into the ocean and eventually works its way into our food supply.
What happens when you do that, it gets into the fish, and then it gets into 1 out of every 6 American women has dangerous levels of mercury in her womb, or it gets into little children and it destroys their hormones and it destroys their sexual development and it destroys their brains.
Since 1995, San Diego Coastkeeper has helped remove more than 1 million pounds of debris from our beaches and waterways with the help of volunteers. Kennedy says we can also speak up at the ballot box and elect people dedicated to protecting the environment.
It's not just the pollution of our waterways, but it's the pollution of our democracy, the subversion of our values, and the destruction of our political system and our information system.
Kennedy moved from New York to Santa Monica about a year ago. He's married to actress Cheryl Hines and has 7 children. As celebrations wind down, marking the 100th anniversary of the birth of Jonas Salk, a new biography explores the many facets of the man. Peggy Pico takes a closer look.
The polio virus can cause lifelong paralysis and death. In 1952, the worst polio outbreak in the U.S. infected nearly 60,000 children that killed more than 3,000 and left many paralyzed in tank respirators called iron lungs. 3 years later, Dr. Jonas Salk developed and introduced the first polio vaccine. Joining me with an intimate look into his life is Dr. Charlotte Jacobs, professor of medicine emeritus at Stanford University and author of the new biography, Jonas Salk, A Life. And Charlotte, briefly remind us of what life was like here in the U.S. before the polio vaccine was developed.
Well, I actually grew up during that era, and it was very frightening. The magazines and newspapers and newsreels had pictures of children struggling with braces, entombed in iron lungs. And what made it so fearful was that you never knew which town or which child would be the crippler's next victim.
And what's the situation with polio like today? Has it been eradicated in the U.S.?
Well, it definitely is eradicated in the U.S., except if you walk in from another country with it, then you could bring it back into the U.S. Thanks to the Global Poliomyelitis Eradication Initiative, which was started by Rotary and now includes 5 groups, polio is almost eradicated worldwide. So far this year, there are only about 70 cases, and most of those are in Pakistan or Afghanistan.
Now, your book reveals the struggle that Jonas Salk faced after developing the vaccine. He was an American hero. He was a celebrity, in fact, but not within the scientific community. How come?
Well, there were several reasons. One, the scientific community at that time all felt that only a vaccine made with a live virus like smallpox could provide lifelong protection. Jonas Salk believed you could use a killed virus, it'd be safer and as effective. Now, he was the junior member of a scientific polio community, and he didn't confront them, but he made that vaccine and tested it in secret behind their backs. Besides that, Jonas Salk was accused of grabbing the limelight and not mentioning other scientists who laid the groundwork. He did, but the press and the public didn't want to hear about Tom Rivers and John Enders. They wanted to hear about their hero, Jonas Salk. And finally, Jonas Salk reached out to the public in ways that no scientist ever had, or physician scientist. He gave interviews for Good Housekeeping. He went on television and showed how to make a vaccine with a Waring blender. Well, that did not sit well with the scientific community.
Sort of this elitism that you're a scientist. But didn't he say in your book that he called himself, you know, this is a public vaccine and I should be a public scientist?
Exactly. That's why he did it.
Now, you did a decade's worth of research, intensive, for this biography. Who did you interview and what kind of documents and archives did you need to get a hold of?
Well, I spent a long time here at University of San Diego where his archives, his extensive archives, are housed. I did need permission from his sons because those archives were not public at the time. I did the March of Dimes archives up in New York, but probably the most important thing to get a real picture of Jonas was I conducted over 100 interviews with friends, family, classmates going back to high school, other scientists, people at the Salk Institute, on. And they gave me wonderful anecdotes and a little more intimate picture of the man.
Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Jonas Salk didn't stop with the polio vaccine. He contributed to co-authored the first flu vaccine, I understand, and he did some work on AIDS.
That's absolutely right. In fact, his co-development of the first effective influenza vaccine occurred just as we were entering World War II, so it actually preceded his polio work. He was first very invested in influenza. He also worked on cancer and multiple sclerosis. When he was in his 70s, he was disturbed by the number of young men dying of AIDS, and no one seemed to be working on a vaccine or very engaged in it. So he entered the AIDS arena at that point in time. He was kind of jeered by some of the scientific community who said,
again,
he's the Rip Van Winkle of science. He's been asleep for all these years and suddenly woke up and thought science hadn't changed from when he left it.
Very briefly, we have to end on this. Why do you think it's important for this generation to get to know Jonas Salk?
Well, Jonas Salk is a hero. And a very human hero, and we don't have too many heroes anymore. I hope his book is inspiring to some. It shows how one man can make a difference. I also think it's important for the public to know what infectious diseases are like prior to vaccines.
Dr. Charlotte Jacobs, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Gwen Eiffel on the next News Hour. Making sense of a tax break both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders agree has to go. That's Thursday on the PBS News Hour.
San Diego's economy is showing signs a slowdown could be coming. The University of San Diego index of leading economic indicators lost value for the third month in a row in September. Economist Alan Ginn, who puts the numbers together, says 3 consecutive declines are strong enough to indicate the economy might be moving in another direction. He also says consumer confidence is lagging a bit, and so is the view of how the national economy is performing. San Diego Padres have a new manager. The team introduced Andy Green today. The former third base coach for the Arizona Diamondbacks will be taking the reins. He's seen on the right in this photo from today's press conference. Green replaces Pat Murphy, who filled in after the team fired Bud Black in June. He brings 4 years of managing experience at the minor league level. Celebrating the history of music at San Diego State with a special mural. Campus leaders unveiled it today. They saved the artwork from the Wrecking Ball 4 years ago. KPBS culture reporter Angela Carone has more on the Love Library ceremony.
Students, alumni, and musicians showed up to see the unveiling of what's called the Backdoor mural. It dates back to the 70s and depicts Aztec warriors in a rock band. It used to hang outside one of SDSU's original concert venues called the Backdoor. Seth Malleus is chair of the anthropology department at SDSU. He fought to save the mural when the venue was going to be demolished to make room for a new student center.
It was just one of these pieces of art because it was student art, because it was part of the Chicano students' organization and their identity at the time period, and because it just spoke to the excitement on campus during the 70s. This was a volatile time. The 60s came to San Diego State. It just came in the early 70s. And I felt like this mural captured that.
Now the mural will remain here on the 3rd floor of the library for generations of students to enjoy. Angela Carone, KPBS News.
There may be a slight warm-up heading into the weekend if you have any outdoor plans. We're looking at a mix of sun and clouds along the coast. Temperatures mostly in the mid to upper 70s there. If you're inland, a little warmer, mostly in the 80s. And a bit cooler for the mountain areas, 60s and 70s right through Sunday. And breezy conditions will continue in the desert, mostly in the mid to upper 80s. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.